I do want to invite you to stand. I'm going to read from the Gospel of Matthew out of reverence for the Gospel reading. Would you stand and listen to Matthew chapter 5? This is Jesus' sermon, the sermon of all sermons, the Sermon on the Mount. Listen to the words of Jesus to those on the side of the mountain. He says to them, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. Y'all are the light of the world. A city built upon a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." This is the written word of the Lord for us today. You may be seated. Thanks be to God. All right, Trinity. Before going too far, I just want to make a really important announcement today. This is going to affect a lot of things at the church, but including myself, it's going to really affect a lot of things. And I just want to be upfront about it. Maybe this will be confusing, but after some serious thinking, I've made the decision that we as a church, that we're not going to spend a dime on anything ever again. No spending at all. Complete spending freeze. From here on out, every cent given to the church is just going to go into a savings account. We're going to find like the best interest rate, high yield savings account that we can find. I don't know, maybe we'll find like a high yield crypto account that we can put all the money in. But it's all going to go in there. No more paying for ministries to serve our community, okay? No more giving to missionaries who are serving overseas. Ignore the alabaster offering announcement you just heard. No more denominational apportionments. We won't be purchasing any curriculum for discipleship. We won't be paying the electric bill or the gas bill or the water bill. No more spending. Totally. I won't be taking home a salary anymore, and no staff will either, for that matter. This is a comprehensive spending freeze on everything. And maybe you're thinking this is because we just don't have enough money in our accounts, but that's not it. That's not it. We operate on a pretty tight budget, and every church always says that, we can always operate on a little bit more, but we've got some savings. We've got money in a savings account. It's not out of a lack that we're going to stop spending. It's actually the opposite. We're doing okay, and we don't want to lose our savings account, so we're just going to keep every single dollar, every single penny in our savings accounts, okay? That work? Is that a plan? Seems like the wisest decision we can make. Amen? Well, we'll talk more about later, but I just needed to make that announcement before jumping into the passage for today. Today we read from one of Jesus' most famous discourses, the Sermon on the Mount. This is the Sermon of Sermons, and last week we read from Matthew 5, again, 1 through 12, the Beatitudes. That was earlier in the service where we read that. But today we turn our attention from statements of who people are, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, and now we turn to what people ought to do. I don't know, we've probably heard this passage before, right? You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Have you ever heard people described as salt of the earth people? Oh, they're salt of the earth people. What do we mean when we say that? Oh, these are down to earth people. No pretense here. These are good people. And I don't know that we've always realized that Jesus coined this phrase. So Jesus tells his disciples and this crowd, ordinary, blue-collar, day laborer, tradespeople, that they are the salt of the earth and that they are the light of the world. He tells them not to lose their saltiness and not to cover their light. Salt and light. These are two very specific references, images chosen by Jesus. Do you know how valuable these two things were in first century Palestine? I mean, it's valuable to us today, for sure. I don't know about you, but I like salt, I like light, but we have an abundance of both. We're really not lacking. Like, we're never without salt. It's incredibly available. We can get it anytime we want. If you want some salt, we got like 30 shakers in the church somewhere. You can grab it. We got salt. It's everywhere. And light. We can always have light. Church, I was making edits to this sermon in the middle of the night in a perfectly lit room. It was great. But not so in first century Palestine. Salt was particularly valuable. You see, in Rome, there was a thing in Rome called the salarium argentum. I don't speak Latin, but it literally means salt money. Romans would get paid a sum of money that would be enough for them to buy salt. Their salary was given to them so they could purchase salt. You know what's crazy is that our word salary literally comes from this Latin word salarium, which means salt. Salary comes from salt money. And it goes back to the trading of salt in the Roman world. Salt was is an incredibly common and available resource for us today, was of extreme value. Extreme value in the first century. Not only did it bring flavor, it preserved. It kept things edible. The next thing Jesus talks about is light. You're the salt, you're the light. Like salt, light is available to us today. We can have as much light or as little light as we want in this room. We can control it however we want. But I can't imagine a time where I didn't have light bulbs in every single one of the rooms of my house. But in first century Palestine, light was limited. It was scarce. It couldn't simply be contained or flipped on. If you wanted light in a dark place, it would be costly. It wasn't super available. You needed to operate a fire indoors with a candle or a fireplace. Light was incredibly valuable because it also determined how people would live their lives. You lived according to the rhythm of the sun and the moon. Without combines with massive headlights, their farming was limited to the availability of light. So when Jesus tells his disciples in the crowd that they are the salt of the earth and the light of the world, he's telling them, you are so valuable. You are the most valuable thing in the world. You are treasured. And church, we're going to unpack this more. We're going to keep going talking about Matthew chapter 5 and being salt and light, but I just want to pause here for just a minute. Jesus is telling people who live under oppression, who live under the boot of empire, people who are subsistence farming, who live day to day, hand to mouth, he tells them, you are so treasured. You are so valuable. You are worth so much. You, image bearer, are made in God's likeness, and you matter. Before going any further, church, I just want to rest for a moment in the realization that when Jesus sees you, when he looks upon you, he sees you as valuable and beautiful and good. We miss the mark, sure. Sure, we may miss the mark and we fail and we fall. We call that sin. But that does not mean that Jesus does not see you as valuable and as one who is made in the image and likeness of God. I think that's a sermon right there. But his language here is a bit strange, I gotta say. He says, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. Salt that loses its saltiness is trampled. Light that's covered is worthless. So I'm really intrigued by that statement because, I don't know, looking like from a chemistry perspective, how can salt lose its saltiness? Like it's like an element. Like the thing is what it is. It can't lose its saltiness, right? Without ceasing to be salt. I mean, it's a molecular compound. That's what gives it its saltiness. The only way that salt can't taste like salt is if it isn't salt. Or it loses its saltiness if it's never used. If it's just never utilized, never eaten. I remember being in high school on a mission trip to Minnesota. Our youth group went up to Minnesota, and one of the trips we went on, one of the little excursions, we went to a farm. Now, I grew up a suburban kid in Belleville, Illinois. Didn't really spend much time on farms. This was one of my first farming experiences, and I remember for the first time seeing a salt lick. Just a square foot block of salt. And I remember a bunch of us dared. You know where this is going. One of our youth group friends who went by the nickname Tibbs. We dared Tibbs to lick the salt lick from end to end. In like the donkey pen. And Tibbs did. He did. He licked that whole salt lick. From one end to another after how many animals had done it, I don't know. But he said it was shockingly salty. But salt can't lose its saltiness. It's what it is. But similarly, how can light not shine? Like, I'm just confused by the image that Jesus uses because the only way that light cannot shine is if it's not light. If it's not on or if it's covered up. Like the only way for light to not be light is by not being used. Just like salt. It's like Jesus is saying to the people, y'all are the most precious thing in the world. Don't go to waste. Don't waste yourselves. You are valuable. You bring life. You bring light. Jesus is saying, hey, the worst thing that could happen is that we are not utilized by our Father in heaven for his purposes. And then Jesus turns his language from his followers, from this crowd on the hill. Now he starts talking about the law and the Pharisees. And he says to them, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And he says to them, y'all need to be more righteous than the Pharisees. Gulp. If you're a first century Jew living in Palestine, and you hear the phrase, be more righteous than the Pharisees, I mean, that's not possible. These were the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the gatekeepers of righteousness, and they knew it. I want to show you something. I'm going to flip through my Bible. This right here. These are the first 5 books of the Old Testament. In my Bible, it's about 200 pages, small print. In the Old Testament, we call this the Torah in Hebrew. First 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You know what's crazy about those Pharisees? They had this brother memorized. From Genesis 1 to the very end of Deuteronomy, they had the entire first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament memorized. But what's even crazier is they not only memorized the Torah, they also created an additional 613 laws on top of the Torah. You think following the Old Testament law is tough? Try being a Pharisee who's created an additional over 600 laws that you have to keep in addition to Torah. These dudes were righteous, and they knew it. And they knew it. They knew all the right answers, and they spent their lives in constant study of Torah, the law. They knew the law. They kept it close to them. They would literally wear it on their bodies. And I think that's the problem. How could Jesus' hearers have a righteousness that surpasses those of the This is, ooh, there we go. Guys, we're having an adventure today, okay? My mic stand doesn't want to stay upright. Jesus says you're whitewashed tombs. You have the veneer of righteousness. You have the appearance of holiness, but inside what you bring forth is not just life, it's death. It's not just not life, it's death. They had what was considered the most valuable thing at the time, the law, Torah. But they kept it to themselves. They hoarded it. They didn't apply it. They knew it, but apparently didn't live it. You know, what was the purpose of the law? What was the purpose of the people of God? Not to contain it, but to share it. You, Israel, are to be a light to the nations. What good is hoarding the promises of God if no one else is welcomed to partake of them? Those of you who cook, let me ask you, what happens to your dinner when you forget the salt? Then you go out to Taco Bell. Then you're like, oh, I'm not eating this. We're going to Culver's. In a few weeks, the men are going to have a chili cook-off. We're going to make chili and play cornhole. I challenge you to not put salt in your chili. See how that turns out. See if you can win the chili cook-off with no salt. Salt, the most valuable of spices, if it's not used, it's pointless. To store it up would be to defeat its purposes. Salt is supposed to be eaten. It's supposed to be used. And why do you think we started daylight savings time to begin with? We all hate daylight savings time, amen? Why did we start daylight savings time? It wasn't so that we could just hoard daylight, but to save it. Maybe this is apocryphal, but it was so that farmers could use the daylight to harvest their crops, get a little bit more daylight for the purposes of farming, so that daylight wouldn't go to waste. This is a valuable resource. So going back to my major announcement, obviously, that was sarcastic. Obviously, we're not going to put a complete and total freeze on all spending of everything in the church. What would happen if we actually did stop spending money on anything and everything? Besides being in the dark and in the quiet and in the cold because we wouldn't have any electricity for not paying our bills, the other thing is I'm pretty sure people would stop giving. I'm pretty sure if the church said we're not going to be utilizing our resources for human flourishing, for the mission of God, let alone pay the bills, I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there would say, well, then I'm not giving to that church. Why would I support that? If we stop supporting the mission of God, we would die. Valuable things aren't meant to merely sit behind glass. To be treasured, they're supposed to be utilized, especially when it comes to the faithfulness of God. Christians are not called to be collectors. Disciples of Jesus are not called to be collectors. We don't hoard, we don't stash. In fact, one of the few things Jesus actually said, he talks about money a lot, but one of the few things he says over and over and over again. Jesus never criticizes anyone for giving. Think of the widow's mite. He never criticizes, as Hamish just told us, anyone for being extravagantly generous and potentially even wasteful. The alabaster jar of perfume. No, what Jesus criticizes financially is people who build bigger barns to hoard more of their resources. Disciples don't merely collect and stash and hoard. We are to be utilized. We are to go out on mission. I mean, this is what James says. Church, let's not be mere hearers of the word, as James wrote, be doers of the word. You see, as valuable as information is, the Christian life, I hate to break it to you, is not just about having the answers. It's not about providing the Sunday school answer. I fear that we've reduced faithfulness to Jesus to a mental affirmation of these truths. I believe in Jesus. I can affirm that in my head. Great. Affirming that does not a disciple make. We are to live faithfully. The Christian life is a life where struggle is permitted, where questions can be asked, but it is a life defined ultimately by love. It is where we give of ourselves for the sake of others. May we not be like the Pharisees who, despite having the entire first 5 books of our Old Testament memorized, neglected to tend to the least of these, who would look at those who were sinners and say, Lord, I thank you that I'm not like them. We don't hoard it intellectually. Christianity is not merely known cognitively, mentally. It is lived out communally. But if you notice, today's sermon is titled The Fulfillment. Jesus is the fulfillment. Jesus said, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Question. Do you like puzzles? I'll be honest, I'm not a puzzle guy. I'm just not a puzzle guy. I understand the satisfaction of like finding the piece and how satisfying it can be when the different shapes fit together perfectly. And when the image is all completed, oh man, I know mentally how rewarding that probably feels like. I just don't care. I don't have the patience for it. That's the truth. But when the puzzle is complete, guess what? It's complete. It's full. It's put together. You don't need to put more pieces into it. It's finished. It's not undone. It's not thrown away. But you no longer need to look at the box to see where the pieces need to go. The puzzle is now the picture. The puzzle is fulfilled. And this is what Jesus means when he says he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. You say, he said, I'm not throwing everything that was away. I'm showing you the full picture of what it is supposed to be. He says, in me the pieces are put together. And this means we no longer live according to the old law. Because it's finished. It's completed. It is fulfilled. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter, but it does mean that Jesus is the completion, the finishing, the fulfillment of that law. You want to know what the fullness of the law, the presence, the love, the intention of God is? Look to Jesus. And I don't know about you, but when I read this passage, I get a bit of whiplash. The first few verses, Jesus is telling the people, the crowd, be salt, be light. And then just immediately he turns on a dime and says that he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, and that you need to have a righteousness that surpasses the Pharisees. So the question I'm stuck with as I read this in this passage that seems to not really flow all that much is, what does being salt and light have to do with Jesus saying, I came not to abolish but to fulfill? This seems like a real quick turnaround. Well, let me ask you this. Do you eat salt on its own? If you do, don't answer. Unless your name is Tibbs and you lick a salt lick on a mission trip in Minnesota. Salt is so valuable, not because of how great it tastes on its own, but because of what it does to other foods. Right? Let me ask you this. Do you stare at the sun? Again, don't answer it if you do. Here's the thing. We can't actually see light. Light is not something we can actually look at. Instead, we see the thing that the light illuminates. We see the effect of the light. We taste the effect of the salt. You see, what makes salt so beautiful is not that it covers up the flavors of foods. It enhances them. It brings it out. What makes light so valuable is not that it covers up whatever it's shining on. It's that it makes whatever it's shining on visible and beautiful and good. Light has this revelatory quality. What makes salt and light are so important is not that they stand alone and are their own things, not that they're autonomous. They're not valuable because of the thing that they are by themselves. No, a steak can be good without salt, but only a steak that has a lot of salt on it can be magnificent and marvelous, right? How is Jesus the fulfillment of the law? Here, I'm going to land the plane for us this morning. The law was given, remember, not to be hoarded, not to be collected, but so that Israel might be a light to all peoples, so that their neighbors might come into covenant with Yahweh. Jesus is the fulfillment, because in him, all persons are truly welcome, because in him, all peoples can be made whole. Because in him, all peoples can be who they were created to be. By saying that he is the fulfillment of the law, Jesus is saying he came so that goodness and beauty and the illumination of God might be made available to all of us. And apparently his disciples are the chosen method of distributing that beauty and that goodness and that illumination. As disciples of the one who fulfills the law, church, our task is to be salt and light. That is, our task is not to merely sit idly by hoarding knowledge about Jesus like the Pharisees. That's insufficient faithfulness. Our task as salt and light is to enhance. It's to illuminate. It's to make more. Our task is to bring life to others, to lift them up, to illuminate them, not to diminish them. Salt makes food more flavorful. Light makes the world more beautiful. Our work is not to condemn and not to belittle and not to make others smaller. I've seen this quote: if God did not send Jesus to condemn the world, I doubt he sent you. No, church. Our work is to bring out of people that which they did not know they had within them. That can only come out of them by the grace of God. And because when we interact with them, we see them as more than the faults that they have, more than the errors that they've made, but those who bear the image of God. When disciples of Jesus encounter other people, they should become more, not less. Our work as disciples of Jesus is to illuminate others, to bring life to them, to speak goodness and beauty to them. We are to be a people through whom others become more of who they were created to be, not less. What is our witness, church? What is our disposition to the world, church? When others look at the church and see disciples of Jesus, do they see us as those who make the world more beautiful, more rich, more flavorful? Or are we those who are diminishing and speaking down and belittling and making small? Who are we called to be? We are to be a people through whom others become more, not less. So, church, don't lose your saltiness. The only way for salt to lose its flavor is to not be utilized. Church, don't hide your light. Do not hide your light. The only way for light to be hidden is to not be on or to be covered up. Here's the final question. How are we to be used? For us to be used by Jesus means that we are not to be merely walking theological dictionaries that have contained all this knowledge. The truth is, the people that Jesus got into the most fights with were the ones who thought they had it all together. It's not even about looking like you have it all together. Jesus said he didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And what is the summary of the law? Jesus says quite plainly, the summary of the law is this: love the Lord your God, love your neighbor. Loving God, loving people by serving one another. You see, church, we are the salt of the world. We are the light of the world. As I close today, I charge you to go and bring beauty to this world. Go and make other people's lives more full. Maybe it's a silly image, but more flavorful, like salt, enhancing who God has created them to be. Go, bring light to people, illuminating upon them the beauty and goodness of God. May we, Trinity, may we be a church, may we be a people through whom others receive the goodness and the beauty and the life of God. This is who we are called to be. May others be lifted up and become who they were created to be because of our presence with them as disciples of Jesus. And this is the good news of God for us today.